As an acoustic player, I'm using reverb all the time. I feel like it's something I'm always trying to improve. I'm always on the journey of trying to find the perfect reverb for my guitar, and potentially it doesn't exist, but I just enjoy the journey. I enjoy the exploration and trying to improve the reverb or get a better reverb sound each time I play. But I know it's something that some people struggle with, so in this video I'm going to be talking about how to get the best reverb sound for your acoustic guitar. And by the way, by best, I mean most natural. Because as acoustic players, most of the time at least, not always, but most of the time, we try to get the most natural sound we can get out of our pickups and pedals. The problem is most reverb pedals are made with the electric player in mind, so they're not the most natural sounding. And for us acoustic players, it can be hard to find a reverb that actually sounds natural. However, there are certain things that you can do to help make your reverb sound more natural, whatever reverb you're using, whether it's a pedal, a rack unit, or even a plugin. So let's start looking at the controls and seeing what they do, and there's certain things to look out for, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I've got the Strymon Bluesky here. This is a really good reverb pedal. And then we have the Fishman AFX Acoustiverb. This is actually designed specifically for acoustic players as well. So the first one is the level of the reverb. And this is basically, it's not the level of your signal stays the same, but it's just the level of the reverb. And with all of this is like with a lot of effects units, you have two signals. You have the dry signal and you have the wet signal, and generally the dry signal kind of stays the same. You're just affecting, making changes to the wet signal. So when I bring this up on the Acoustiverb, it's called level. So if I bring that up, that's just the level of the reverb itself, all the way to the right, and then all the way to the left, all the way down, I'll get no reverb at all. Similar here on the Strymon, it's called mix. So basically it's mixing the dry and wet signal. And then obviously all the way to the right, the Bluesky goes quite extreme. It's a very, very mixed signal when I have it all the way to the right. And then all the way to the left is obviously off. So that's what it might be called different things on different reverbs, but basically it's the level of the reverb itself compared to your original dry signal. So then we have decay time, and that's basically how long you want the reverb to go on for, you know. So when you hit the guitar and then stop playing, a good way to kind of judge this is like do some very sharp strums or picks, you know, and then just wait and hear how long the reverb goes on for. So I find it's about getting a balance between these two things, between the level or the mix of the reverb itself and the decay time. So I personally quite like to have a long decay time. I like it to be quite long so you can still hear it for a while. And this again is a balance. You don't want it too long that it then interrupts or interferes with what you're playing. So it depends on what you're playing and how fast your playing is and how clear you want your playing to be. So for me, generally, I want my guitar to be forefront in what I'm playing, and then the reverb to kind of just sit behind that, you know? So you can still hear the reverb clearly, but it's not interfering with what I'm playing. You can still clearly hear what I'm playing, you know? This is what I like. This is kind of the sound that I'm after. Obviously, it depends on the song, depends on what kind of sound really I'm after. Maybe sometimes I might want it a more ambient sort of sound if I'm playing really sort of slow and long notes, you know, then I might want something different. But for generally the sort of natural sound, the natural reverb that I'm looking for and I'm talking about here is this, that it's clear and you can hear it, but it's just behind what I'm playing, so you can still hear all the notes very clearly in what I'm playing, even if I'm playing fast and multiple notes at the same time. So I should mention that I'm a picker, I'm not a strummer, but I will do some examples of strumming, and I would have thought that it would actually be the same for strumming. This natural sounding reverb that I'm talking about, it will be still the same for strumming as it will be for picking as well. This sort of, the reverb that is natural sounding, that is behind what you're playing and doesn't get in the way of your strumming. I'll do some examples of this as well. So the first thing I like to do is choose the type of reverb. And there's three kind of main types of reverb. There's spring, there's plate, and there's room. Now, there's obviously lots of variations of these, but generally going for something like room, it could be called something else like hall maybe, but it gives a natural sound of emulates the natural sound of being in a room or hall, and the reflections of the walls. That is, to me, is always the most natural sounding. So if you have something like that, then choose that one. For spring is based on the sound of a literal physical spring. So in some amps and some other effects, you can actually get these physical springs, and they would send the audio signal through an actual or various springs, and that would give this sort of springy, reverby sound. To me, that's not a natural sound. That's not a natural reverb sound, so I wouldn't choose that. There is plate, which is literally sending the signal through a big metal sheet, a big metal plate. That can sound fairly natural, and actually the Acoustiverb has that, and it sounds really good. But I would actually think that it's not as natural as the room or hall. So on the Bluesky it says room, on the Acoustiverb it actually says hall. But something like this, it basically represents the being inside a large room and getting these natural reverb reflections, you know. So that's generally what I would choose when I'm after this natural sounding reverb. So the next control is by far the most important to get a natural sounding reverb, and that is the tone control. So it basically lets you control the frequencies of just the reverb. So it won't actually affect your dry signal, your original signal, it'll just affect the reverb itself. And this is very important because this will give you control to how to really make that reverb sound the most natural it can. To me, to my ears, all the low end reverb is the most natural. So what I do is I actually cut out all the high frequencies in the reverb. So it might be called other things on your reverb unit, whatever you're using. On the Acoustiverb, it's called tone. So it literally is just one knob, and you obviously, if I turn the tone all the way to the right, then it'll give me lots of high frequencies, and all the way to the left, it'll cut out those high frequencies and just give me the low frequencies, which is what I want. So that's what I do. I cut out all those high frequencies. Same here with the Bluesky. It is, there's kind of two, there's low damp and then there's high damp. I cut out the high damp, so I cut all those high frequencies and I bring up the low frequencies. And that just, I feel it gives me the most natural, and it gives me all that kind of warmth, resonance of that I just love about reverb, you know. All those you can have, if you want something kind of brighter and something a little bit more ambient and atmospheric, maybe you want to experiment with using high frequencies in the reverb. But to me, it can sound very unnatural. So I just cut them all out and just have all those low frequencies in the reverb itself. So then once you've got your sound, once you've got your reverb sound and you're happy with that, then you can experiment with the decay time and the level. And this is all just a balance. And I feel this part is maybe just a preference, but I quite like a long decay time. But I feel like if the longer the decay time, then the lower the level needs to be, you know, because I don't want it interfering with my playing, you know, so it's a balance. So I quite like a long decay time, and then I bring the volume of the reverb itself. So remember, it only controls the volume of the reverb, not your original signal. It's compared to the original signal. The volume of the wet sound, the reverb, quite low, you know. But you can go the other way, experiment. So have a less decay time, bring up the volume maybe, you know. So just experiment and try to get that balance. It's all about just getting that balance. And depending on what you're playing, of course, and what kind of sound you're after, I find this can give the most natural sounding reverb. But the main thing is getting that control over the frequencies, over the tone, getting that nice sounding reverb, and then you can experiment with the decay time and the volume of the reverb itself. And as I say, it's all just a balance. Too much reverb and your notes will be drowned out with no clarity, and not enough reverb and your sound might sound very small, narrow, dry and unnatural, especially if you're using a pickup. So then moving on, a bit more advanced from this would be introducing more pickups and microphones, and then them complementing each other with their own each individual type of reverb. So I really hope this helped you in getting a natural sounding reverb for your acoustic guitar. Let me know how you get on in the comments below. I'd love to know. Other than that, have a great day, and I'll see you again in another video very soon. Bye.
Bye.